Our next topic are inequalities, and we're going to be solving and graphing these. So the goal is to solve, graph, and also use the correct notation for linear inequalities. So what we'll start with is what are the inequalities, and there are 4 of them. There's this first one, which means greater than. So for example, I could say 5 is greater than 1. For the next one, this is greater than or equal to. So I could say 5 is greater than or equal to 5. Next, I can say less than. So for example, 1 is less than 5. And then my last one is less than or equal to. So for example, 1 is less than or equal to 1. As far as a picture goes, if I want to write something like x is less than 2, I would write this on a number line. Here's 0 in the middle. So I would go over to 2, and I want to shade everything less than 2, but not including 2. So when we do not including, we use a circle. So there we have everything less than 2. As far as intervals go, so intervals are a way to depict this, but not actually having a picture. So intervals, the way they're set up is they have parentheses and brackets. So parentheses and brackets. The parentheses, those correspond to not equal to, whereas brackets correspond to equal to. So in this picture that I've just drawn, what's the smallest that x can be? So if I'm looking at this picture, how far left does it go? And what you notice is that it keeps on going forever and ever. So the smallest that x could be is negative infinity. Then you ask yourself, can it be equal to negative infinity? Well, nothing can be equal to infinity. That's just an idea, so I'll use parentheses. Next, what's the highest that x could be? So if you go all the way to the right on my picture of what I've shaded, well, all the way to the right is a 2, but we said it can't equal 2, so we'll use parentheses. And we're going to do a few more of these, but that's just kind of the basics for intervals and inequalities. So example 1, draw the inequality and also write it as an interval. So first let's draw it. X is less than or equal to 3. So here's 3 on my picture. I said that it could be equal to 3, so I want to use a closed circle. And then we're going to shade everything that's less than that. Good. Now for my interval, I want to say what's the smallest the x could be. So how far left does the picture go? Well, it goes on forever. So the smallest that x can be is negative infinity. And we always use parentheses with infinity because you can't equal infinity. It's just an idea. Now I say how far right could x go? So how far to the right can we go? Well, the highest that x can be is 3. And we said that it could be equal to 3 if it wanted to. So that's where we use the square brackets. Now let's draw the inequality and also write it as an interval. X is greater than negative 3. All right, so here's negative 3 on my number line. We said it's greater than. We did not say equal to, so I'm going to draw an open circle. And we'll shade everything that's above it. For my interval, do the same thing. How far left do my x values go? So what's the smallest that x could be? Well, the smallest or the most left that it goes is negative 3, but we said it couldn't be equal to it, so I'll use parentheses. As far as how big can x be, well, there's no bound, goes on forever, so we'll write infinity, and we always use parentheses with infinity. So our answer for the interval is negative 3 to infinity, both of them using open intervals. Now what I want to do is I want to solve this inequality and write it as an interval. When I'm solving inequalities, you want to treat it just like an equal sign. So treat like an equal sign, unless, and this is a big unless, you divide or multiply by a negative number. If you do that, all you have to do is flip the inequality. That's the only difference. So I'm just going to pretend like instead of saying greater than or equal to, this just says equal to. Let's just pretend. I only have to worry about that if at some point I divide or multiply by a negative number. So if this was just equal to, I would start by adding 1 to both sides. And then I would divide by 3. Now 3 is not negative, so I don't need to worry about flipping anything. So I'll just say x is greater than or equal to 2. As for my picture, so x is greater than or equal to 2, I want to use a closed circle because it could be equal to, and I'll shade everything larger than 2. For my interval, the smallest x could be is 2, and we said that it could be equal to 2, so we'll use a square bracket. And the largest is infinity, and we always use parentheses for that. Now let's solve 2 minus x is greater than or equal to 6. So again, we're going to treat this just like an equal sign, unless I go and divide by a negative or multiply by a negative. So to get x by itself, I'll subtract 2 from both sides. So I get negative x is greater than or equal to 4. And now, to get x by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 1. And that gives me an x on the left and a negative 4 on the right. But because I just divided by a negative, I'm going to flip that inequality. Instead of saying greater than or equal to, it'll now say less than or equal to. That's the only difference, is if you multiply or divide by a negative, flip the sign. As far as my picture goes, this says less than or equal to negative 4, so I use a closed circle. The smallest, so the most left that x could be, looks like negative infinity, and we always use parentheses for that. The furthest right that we can go is negative 4. We did include negative 4, so there's my square bracket. And now let's do a little bit harder problem. I'm going to treat this less than sign exactly like it says equals. If this just said equals, the first thing we would do is distribute this 2, and also distribute that negative 2. So I'll have 2 minus 8x is less than negative 2x minus 6 minus 4. I didn't divide both sides or multiply both sides by a negative, so I'm not worried about the inequality just yet. Next thing I want to do is let's kind of combine some terms. So I have a 2 minus 8x is less than, and this negative 6 and negative 4, that combines to be a minus 10. All right, so we talked about this before. Whenever your variable is on both sides, just move one of them. So I'm going to move this negative 2x over. When I do that, it looks like I get a negative 6x on the left-hand side and a negative 10 on the right. I didn't multiply or divide by a negative, so we're good. Next thing I'll do is subtract 2. So negative 6x is less than negative 12. And lastly, I want to divide by a negative 6. But remember what we got to do. I'm going to have, just a positive 2 on the right. But because I divided by that negative, flip the sign. So my answer is x is greater than 2. So let's draw that. I use an open circle because we don't want to include 2. And my interval would be 2 to infinity with open parentheses on both ends.